Here's a thing that took me 11 years to notice, and once I noticed it, I couldn't stop seeing it, and it changed everything I thought I knew about our place in the galaxy. Alien ships don't cross the human border. I don't mean they're not allowed to. There's no wall out there. No fence, no minefield, no fleet sitting on the line turning people away. The border of human space is just an imaginary mark on a chart, a line somebody drew between the stars a long time ago, and by every law and treaty in the galaxy, any ship is free to cross it. Trade ships do it. Passenger liners do it. It's open space. But the navigators, the alien ones, the ones flying the ships, they change course. Every time. They come sailing along a route that would take them straight through our territory, the shortest path, the sensible path, and then just before they reach the line, they alter heading. They go around. They add days, sometimes weeks, to their journey, burning extra fuel, costing their companies money, all to route around a stretch of empty space that they have every legal right to fly through. And here's the part that took me 11 years, and a lot of quiet conversations to understand. They don't know why they do it. Ask an alien navigator why they changed course at the human frontier, and they'll give you an answer. But it's never the real answer. It's a reason they made up after the fact, without realizing they made it up. Oh, the currents are better this way. Oh, my company prefers this route. Oh, I just had a feeling. They believe these reasons, but push a little and the reasons fall apart, and underneath them is nothing but a blank, a place where the real reason should be and isn't. They change course at the human border the way you pull your hand back from a hot stove, before thought, below thought, and then their mind hurries to invent a story about why, because a mind can't stand not knowing why it did a thing. I spent the back half of my life figuring out the real reason. This is that story, and I'm warning you now, it's not the story you think it's going to be. It's not a story about how strong we are. It's stranger than that and sadder and in the end more beautiful, and it's about a thing our species did once, long ago, that we ourselves forgot, but that the rest of the galaxy never, ever will. Let me tell you who I am and how I came to be the one who figured it out, because it matters, and because I want you to understand I'm nobody special. That's important. The person who solves the great mystery isn't always a genius or a hero. Sometimes it's just somebody who was in the right place, paying attention for a very long time. My name is Adiz Bello. For 30 years I was a traffic analyst for the Frontier Transit Authority, which is exactly as unglamorous as it sounds. I sat at a console on a monitoring station called Waystation Coal, out on the very edge of human space, and I watched ships. All day, every day. Incoming, outgoing, passing through. I logged their courses, flagged the anomalies, kept the great slow river of galactic traffic flowing safely past our little corner of the map. It's the kind of job you can do half asleep once you've been at it a while. Most of my colleagues did. I didn't, not because I was more dedicated, I want to be honest, but because I'm the kind of person who notices patterns. It's almost a compulsion. I see a thing happen twice and my brain starts asking whether it'll happen a third time, and once it's happened enough times, I can't let it go until I understand it. It's made me insufferable at card games. It made me, eventually, the person who cracked the biggest secret in the galaxy. Waystation Coal was a lonely posting. A gray drum of a station, spinning slowly in the dark at the edge of the frontier, crewed by maybe 60 people who mostly kept to themselves. The view was the one good thing. Out the big observation port you could see the whole sweep of the border region, the last scattered human systems, and beyond them the great dark gulf, and beyond that the lights of the wider galaxy, the trade lanes glittering with the traffic of 1,000 species going about their endless business. And every day I watched that traffic, and somewhere in my second decade there, the pattern started to surface. It started as an itch, a wrongness I couldn't name. I'd be logging the day's traffic and I'd notice a ship, a big SETI bulk hauler, say, or a Vornish passenger liner, coming in along a course that should have taken it straight across our territory. And then a few hours later I'd notice it had changed course, routed around, And I'd think, and log it and move on because ships change course all the time for 100 reasons, weather in the solar wind, updated navigation data, a change in destination. Nothing strange about a course correction. But I kept seeing it. And the thing my pattern brain latched onto, the thing that turned an idle into an obsession was this: it was always in the same direction. They always changed course to go around human space, never through it, never toward it, always around. So I did what I do. I started keeping my own records, off the books on my own time just for me. Every ship that approached the human border, I logged its original course and its final course. And I built up the data month after month, year after year, until I had thousands of entries, and then I ran the numbers, and the numbers made my blood run cold. In 11 years of records, not one alien ship had crossed the human border on a through route. Not one. Thousands of ships from dozens of species on courses that would have naturally taken them through our space, and every single one had changed course to avoid it. 100%. That's not a pattern. A pattern has exceptions. This had none. It was a law. An invisible, unspoken, unbreakable law, and nobody had written it. And as far as I could tell, nobody but me had even noticed it. I checked my work 100 times. I thought I'd made an error. You don't get 100% in the real world. The real world is messy. But there it was, clean as anything. Alien navigators did not cross the human frontier. Ever. And they did it while insisting, when anyone thought to ask, that there was no reason they didn't, that of course they could, that they just preferred to go around. The first person I told was my supervisor, a decent tired man named Okafor who ran the station's day shift. I brought him my data. I laid it all out. And he looked at it, and he frowned, and he said the thing that everyone said, the thing I'd get used to hearing over the years. So, everybody knows aliens avoid our space. That's not news, Adiz. It's just how it is. It's always been like that. And that stopped me cold because he was right. Everybody did know. It was so well known that nobody thought about it. Ask any human who lived on the frontier and they'd tell you, sure, the aliens keep to their side. They don't come into ours much. That's just how it's always been. We had 100 comfortable explanations for it. They didn't like our systems. They found us standoffish. There wasn't much out here worth the trip. Human space was poor and remote and off the main lanes, so why would anyone route through it? Every one of those explanations was something we'd made up, exactly the way the alien navigators made up their reasons. We had a blank where the real answer should be, and we'd filled it with comfortable stories, and we'd stopped looking because the stories were good enough to stop the itch. But they weren't true. I could prove they weren't true because the avoidance was too perfect, too total, too consistent across species that had nothing else in common. The SETI and the Vorn and the Thesset and the Lead agreed on almost nothing, different biologies, different cultures, ancient rivalries between them. But they all agreed, without ever discussing it, without even knowing they agreed, on one single thing. You do not fly through human space. Why? That question ate 11 years of my life. And the answer, when I finally found it, came from the last place I ever expected. It came from an old alien, dying alone on a station at the edge of everything, who told me the one thing his entire species had spent 100,000 years trying to forget. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I started actually digging, because at first I had nothing but the pattern, and a pattern isn't an answer. I started asking. That was all I could think to do. Whenever an alien ship docked at Waystation Coal, which wasn't often, but it happened, for refueling or repairs or emergencies, I'd find a reason to talk to the navigator. And I'd work the conversation around, gentle, casual, to the question. Why'd you route around human space? You could have saved yourself 2 days going through. And every time I got the same thing. First, a reason, quick, confident, offered without hesitation. Better solar currents on the outer route. Company policy. The through route has bad navigation beacons. And every time when I gently pushed on the reason, pointed out that the currents were actually worse on the outer route, or that their company had no such policy, or that our beacons were perfectly maintained, every time the navigator would pause, and a strange look would come over them. A kind of confusion, a groping, and they'd reach for another reason, and that one wouldn't hold either, and eventually, if I pushed far enough, they'd arrive at the truth without meaning to. They'd say something like, "I don't. Actually, no, you don't go through there, you just don't." And they'd look unsettled, like they'd caught themselves doing something strange and couldn't explain it, and then they'd change the subject quickly because the not knowing frightened them. It frightened all of them. That was the consistent thing. Underneath the made-up reasons, when you got down to the blank, there was fear. Not a sharp fear. An old, deep, instinctive fear, the kind that doesn't have a memory attached to it anymore, just the feeling. The way you might be afraid of the dark without being able to say what's in it. They were afraid of human space, all of them, every species, and none of them knew why, and the not knowing was itself a part of the fear. One Thesset navigator, a careful, thoughtful old creature who'd been flying the lanes for 2 centuries, got closest to putting it into words. When I pushed her past all her made-up reasons, she was quiet for a long time, and then she said something I wrote down that night and have never forgotten. "It is not a thing we decide. It is a thing we are. Every navigator of every people knows it, though none of us are taught it. You do not fly through the human dark. The knowing is older than my species' memory of itself. It is in us the way the fear of falling is in us before learning, beneath learning. I cannot tell you why. I can only tell you that in 200 years of flying, the thought of taking my ship through your space has never once seriously formed in my mind, and now that you make me look at that, I find it is the strangest thing about my own self that I have ever considered." She looked at me with those deep alien eyes. "What did your people do, to be written so deep into all of us? What did you do, that we should carry the avoiding of you in our blood, and not even know we carry it?" And I didn't have an answer, but her question became my question. What did we do? Because that was the thing that reframed everything. It wasn't that aliens found us unpleasant, or that our space was poor and remote. It was that something had happened once, long enough ago that even the long-lived species had forgotten the event, but not the lesson, something that had carved a warning so deep into the galactic mind that it had become instinct, had passed below memory into something like reflex, transmitted somehow across generations and species, until it was simply part of what it meant to be a navigator in this galaxy. You do not fly through the human dark. What did we do? The trouble was, we didn't remember either. That was the part that made no sense, the part that kept me up at night. Whatever this thing was, this event so enormous it had branded itself into the instincts of the whole galaxy. It should have been the central fact of human history. It should have been in every textbook, carved on every monument, the first thing every human child learned. A thing that powerful that we did, that terrified an entire galaxy into avoiding us forever. But there was nothing. I searched. Once I understood what I was looking for, I spent years searching the human historical record for anything that could explain it, and I found nothing. Our history was ordinary, unremarkable even by galactic standards. We'd expanded from our homeworld, settled our little cluster of systems, joined the galactic community, traded and squabbled and lived. We'd fought some wars, small ones by galactic scale, nothing that would frighten anyone. We'd never done anything, in all our recorded history, that could possibly explain why every alien in the galaxy flinched away from our territory like it was a wound in the sky. Which could only mean one thing. Whatever we'd done it before our recorded history, before we remembered. So long ago that we'd forgotten it the same way the aliens had forgotten it, except they'd kept the fear and we'd kept nothing at all. We didn't even know to be afraid of ourselves. And that, I realized, was the strangest and most frightening possibility of all. There was something in our past, something we had done, something enormous and terrible enough to mark the galaxy forever, and we had lost it. Forgotten it so completely that we'd become a mild, ordinary, unremarkable species, with no memory of ever having been anything else. The galaxy remembered a monster, And the monster had forgotten it was ever a monster and had grown up into us, quiet, friendly, harmless us, never knowing what slept in our own deep past. I had to know what it was. I could not know. And so, when I retired from the transit authority, I didn't go home to a quiet life like a sensible person. I took my pension and my 11 years of data and my one impossible question, and I went looking. Out into the wider galaxy, among the species who avoided us, searching for the one thing none of them remembered but all of them feared. It took me 9 more years to find the answer. And I found it in the end, from a dying alien on a forgotten station, who was the last living member of a species that had made it their sacred duty to remember the thing everyone else was allowed to forget. I spent 9 years chasing a ghost. That's what it felt like most of the time, chasing something that everyone could feel and no one could see. I went from world to world, station to station, out along the trade lanes and into the old core systems, and everywhere I went I asked my question, and everywhere I went I got the same fog. The aliens avoided human space. Everyone knew it. No one knew why. And when I pushed, when I tried to dig down to the root, I hit that same blank wall of forgotten fear, over and over, in 100 different species. But I learned things in those 9 years. I learned that the avoidance wasn't just navigators. It went deeper than that. It was in the languages. Many galactic tongues had old idioms, half-forgotten sayings that used the human dark, or the quiet worlds, as a way of saying a place you don't go, a threshold you don't cross. It was in the trade patterns, which flowed around human space in ways that made no economic sense, and that every economist explained away with made-up reasons. It was in the star charts, the really old ones, where some ancient cartographers had marked our region with symbols whose meaning had been lost. Symbols that appeared nowhere else, on no other region of space. Symbols that the modern chart makers copied faithfully without any idea what they meant, because that was how it had always been done. The whole galaxy had a scar, and the scar was shaped like us, and nobody could remember getting it. I started to focus my search on the oldest species. That was my one good idea in those 9 years. If the event was ancient enough to have been forgotten by everyone, then my best hope was the species with the longest memories. The truly old ones. The ones who'd been flying the lanes for hundreds of thousands of years, who might have kept some fragment of it in their deep records, even if the fear had detached from the memory everywhere else. And that search eventually led me to the Usai. I'd barely heard of the Usai before I went looking for them. Almost nobody had by then. They were a dying species, genuinely dying down to their last scattered few, a people who had once been great and were now nearly gone, faded out of the galaxy the way old species sometimes do, not with a war or a catastrophe, but just with a long, slow guttering, fewer and fewer of them each generation, until there was almost nothing left. But the Usai were old, older than almost anyone, and more than that, and this was the thing that made me chase them across half the galaxy, the Usai were rememberers. That was their whole thing, their sacred purpose, the role they'd played in the galactic community for as long as anyone could recall. When other species forgot things, the Usai remembered them. They were archivists, historians, keepers of the deep record. Other peoples came and went, rose and fell, forgot their own pasts. The Usai remembered it all. They held the galaxy's memory so that the galaxy didn't have to. And if anyone still held the memory of what humanity had done, the real memory, the event itself and not just the detached fear, it would be the Usai. I found the last one on a station called Threshold, at the very edge of the old core systems, about as far from human space as you can get and still be in the galaxy. His name was SS Yete, I'll write it S-set, though that doesn't capture the hiss of it. And he was the last Usai alive. The very last. When he died, I understood, the Usai would be gone entirely, and everything they remembered would go with them, unless someone else carried it forward. He was ancient beyond my ability to guess. The Usai lived a long time even by galactic standards, and S-set was old even for a Usai. The last of a dying people, kept alive past his natural span by the machines of the station, a frail, translucent thing curled in a life-support cradle in a quiet room full of the accumulated records of 100,000 years. He was blind by then, nearly deaf. But his mind was clear, clear as deep water, and when I came into his room and told him what I was looking for, he went very still, and then he made a sound that the translator rendered as something between a sigh and a laugh. "So," he said, "a human, come at last to ask the question. I have wondered all my long life whether one of you would ever come. I had begun to think you never would. That you had forgotten so completely you would never think to ask." A pause. "I am glad I lived to see it. I did not want to die with this still locked inside me and no one to give it to." I sat with Set for 3 days. He was too frail to talk for long, so we went slowly, an hour at a time, with long rests between. And over those 3 days, the last of the us told me the thing his people had spent 100,000 years remembering. The thing that everyone else was allowed to forget, but that the us had made it their sacred duty to keep. I'm going to tell it to you the way he told it to me, and I have to warn you again, it's not what you expect. When you hear humanity did something that terrified the whole galaxy, you imagine we were conquerors, warriors. That we swept out of our little corner and burned worlds and made everyone fear us through violence. That's the human vanity version, the version we'd tell about ourselves if we made it up. It wasn't that. It was the opposite of that, and that's what makes it the most human thing I've ever heard. 100,000 of your years ago, Set began, the galaxy was not as it is now. It was younger and crueler, and it was ruled, all of it, every settled world, by a single power. We called them the Concordants. They were not a species. They were many species bound together under one rule, and that rule was total, and it was merciless, and it had lasted so long that no one alive could remember a time before it, and no one imagine a time after it. The Concordants owned the galaxy. Every world paid tribute, every people bent the knee, and any world that did not bend the knee, the Concordants erased, not conquered, erased, wiped clean of life, made an example of, so that the lesson would hold. The lesson was simple. There is no resisting the Concordants. There is only submission or death. He paused for a long time. I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then he went on. Your people were young then, newly come to the stars, a small, poor, unremarkable species on the far edge of everything, exactly as you are now. And the Concordants came to you as it came to everyone and demanded your submission, your tribute, your knee. His blind eyes turned toward me. And your people said no. That alone was not remarkable, Set continued. Others had said no. Foolish, proud young species, again and again across the ages, had said no to the Concordants. And the Concordants had erased them every time without difficulty, and the galaxy had watched and learned the lesson once again. There is no saying no. So when the humans said no, the galaxy did not hope. The galaxy grieved a little for another foolish young species about to be erased and looked away, because it could not bear to watch again. But the humans did not do what the others had done. The others who said no had done so from pride or from desperation, and they had tried to resist the Concordants in the way you resist a power, by fighting it, by matching strength against strength, and they had lost, because the Concordance was stronger than any world, than any alliance of worlds. The humans did something different, something no one had done before or has done since. He drew a long, rattling breath. The humans understood somehow that they could not win, that no one could win, not against a power that owned the whole galaxy and had for ages beyond counting. They understood that the Concordance could not be beaten, and so they did not try to beat it. They did something else entirely. They decided that if they could not win, and if submission was death of the soul even when it spared the body, then they would make one thing true, no matter the cost. They would make the Concordants pay a price for them so terrible that it would never be forgotten. Set's frail body shifted in its cradle. You must understand what your people did, human, because it is the thing my people have remembered for 100,000 years, and it is the thing your people forgot. Faced with a power that could not be beaten, the humans chose to lose in a way that would break the power forever. They did not surrender. They did not flee. They fought but not to win, because winning was impossible. They fought to make the winning cost more than any victory could be worth. Every human world the Concordance came to, the humans made them burn for, not strategically, not sensibly, totally. Every human on every world fought to the last breath and made the Concordance spend 100 of its own to take a single one of them. They booby-trapped their own worlds to deny them. They destroyed everything of value rather than let it be taken. They turned each of their small, poor systems into a wound that would not close, a place where the Concordance bled and gained nothing but ash. It should not have mattered, Esset said. The humans were small. Their worlds were few. By every calculation the Concordance made, and the Concordance calculated everything. The cost of erasing humanity, even at 100 to 1, even at 1,000 to 1, was affordable. The Concordance was vast. It could spend those lives. It could absorb that cost. And so it came on, world after human world, paying the terrible price, expecting that eventually the humans would break, would see the hopelessness of it, would finally submit like everyone always submitted in the end. The humans never broke. That is the thing. That is the thing that changed the galaxy forever. The Concordance kept waiting for the moment the humans would understand they had lost and give up, because that is what every species does at the end when the hopelessness becomes total. And that moment never came. The humans understood they had lost from the very beginning. They had known it before the first shot. And they had decided that losing was not the same as submitting, and that a defeat could be made into a weapon if you were willing to pay everything for it. So they paid everything. World after world, to the last child, they paid everything, and they made the Concordance pay 100-fold for the privilege of erasing a species that had never had a chance of winning, and had never once, not for an instant, considered surrender. Esset was quiet for a long moment. And the galaxy watched, he said softly. This time the galaxy could not look away, because it was seeing something it had never seen. Not a rebellions it had seen. Something else. It was watching a small, doomed people teach the immortal Concordance a thing the Concordance had never learned in all its ages of rule, that there is a kind of enemy against whom overwhelming power is not enough, an enemy who does not calculate, who does not weigh the odds and submit when they turn hopeless. An enemy who will simply spend everything, without limit, without bottom, to make you pay, and against whom, therefore, victory itself becomes a kind of defeat, because the price of winning breaks you as surely as losing would. By the time the last human world burned, Esset said, the Concordance was no longer what it had been. Not in its size, it was still vast. In its mind. Something had broken in the mind of the power that ruled the galaxy. It had spent so much, bled so much, paid so horribly to erase one small species that had never threatened it, that the whole edifice of its rule had cracked, because every other subject world had watched. Every tribute-paying, knee-bending world in the galaxy had watched the humans make the Concordance bleed, and they had learned the lesson the humans died to teach. The Concordance is not invincible. It can be hurt. It can be made to pay. Not defeated, the humans were not defeated, they were erased, but hurt terribly by anyone willing to pay the human price. And the fear that had held the galaxy in submission for ages, the fear that the Concordance could not be resisted, that fear was gone. The humans had spent themselves to kill it. Within a few generations, the Concordance fell. Not to any single power. To all of them at once, world after world, rising up, no longer afraid, each one willing now to pay the price the humans had shown them how to pay. The Concordance that had ruled the galaxy since before memory came apart, and out of its fall came the free galaxy that exists today, the trade lanes, the many peoples, the community of worlds. All of it built on a foundation that almost no one remembers, built on the graves of a small species that chose to lose in a way that set everyone else free. Esset turned his blind eyes toward me, and his voice dropped very low. That is what your people did, human. That is what the galaxy forgot but could not stop fearing. You did not conquer us. You freed us. And you did it by showing the galaxy the most terrifying thing it has ever seen, a species that could not be ruled, because it could not be made to submit, because it would rather die entire to the last child than bend, and would make the bending cost more than any power could bear to pay. The galaxy has feared you ever since, not because you are cruel, because you are the proof that overwhelming power means nothing against those who refuse to be ruled by it. Every tyrant that has risen since, and there have been some, has looked at the human dark and remembered, in the deep instinctual way that has outlived the memory itself, that there is a kind of people you must never, ever corner, because cornering them does not make them submit. It makes them spend everything to destroy you, and they will, and no power is great enough to stop a people who have stopped counting the cost. I sat with that for a long time. The last us and I, in that quiet room full of 100,000 years of memory, and the enormity of what he'd told me settling over me like snow. We'd forgotten. That was the part I couldn't get past. We'd done the most extraordinary thing any species had ever done. We'd thrown ourselves entire into the fire to break a galactic tyranny and free every other species from it. And we'd forgotten it so completely that we'd become an ordinary, mild, unremarkable people who couldn't understand why the galaxy kept its distance. The humans who did that thing died. All of them, or nearly all, said explained that a few survived, scattered, hidden, and that we were descended from them, from the handful who lived through the erasure of our species and slowly, over 100,000 years, rebuilt and forgot and became us. We were the children of the ones who paid everything, and we didn't even know it. Why did we forget? I asked him. If your people remembered for 100,000 years, why didn't we? And Set was quiet for a while, and then he gave me an answer that I've thought about every day since. Perhaps, he said, because you could not have survived remembering it. Think human. To carry the memory of what your ancestors did, the totality of it, every world, every child, the deliberate choice to lose everything, to carry that in the front of your mind, generation after generation. It would have made you into something terrible. A people defined by that memory would have become monsters in truth, worshipping their own capacity for total sacrifice, seeking out the fire again and again. Your ancestors, I think, understood this. The few who survived, I think they chose to forget. I think they buried it on purpose, so that their children could grow up ordinary and kind and free, unburdened by the terrible thing that had bought that freedom. They gave up the memory so that you could have a normal life. It was their last gift to you, to let you forget what they paid so that you would not have to carry it. He paused. My people kept the memory so that yours would not have to. That is why the us remember. That has always been why we remember, to carry the weights that would break the ones who lived them. And now I am the last, and I am giving this weight to you because someone among the humans should know at last what their ancestors did. Not all of you. That would be dangerous. But one, you. So that it is not entirely lost. So that when the last us-I dies, the memory does not die with him. Set died the night after he finished telling me. I think he'd been holding on for it, holding on for someone to come and take the weight, so that he could finally set it down and rest. The last of the us-I, 100,000 years of memory, guttering out at last in a quiet room at the edge of the galaxy, but not lost, not quite. He'd handed it to me first, and then he'd let go. I stayed with him until the end. It seemed the least I could do, for the last member of a species that had spent its entire existence carrying the memories that would have broken everyone else, including us, including the very thing that made us free. When he was gone, I sat a long time in that room full of records, and I wept, for him and for his vanished people and for my own ancestors, the ones who paid everything and asked to be forgot so that I could grow up ordinary and kind and free, never knowing. And then I had to decide what to do with what I knew. Because that's the thing about a terrible truth. Once you have it, you're responsible for it. Set had given me the memory, but he'd also given me a warning, hadn't he? Not all of you, that would be dangerous. A people who remembered what we'd done, who carried it in the front of their minds, might become the monsters our ancestors had feared, might go looking for the fire again, might turn the most terrible and selfless act in galactic history into a boast, a threat, an identity. We're the ones who broke the concordance, cross us and we'll do it again. That's a poison. I could see how it would poison us. I could feel the pull of it in my own chest, even the seductive pride of it, the temptation to go home and tell everyone, look what we are, look what we did, look how they fear us. I understood, sitting in that room, why our ancestors chose to forget. And I understood that the choice was still ours to make, in every generation. And I decided, it took me a long time, but I decided that I would not be the one to hand my whole species a weapon that would turn us back into the thing the galaxy feared. I would keep it, the way Set kept it. I would carry the weight so that others didn't have to. I would tell it carefully to a few, the way it was told to me, so that it wasn't lost but wasn't loosed either. But before I went home to live out my years as a quiet keeper of an old secret, the galaxy gave me one more thing. It gave me a chance to see, with my own eyes, that the thing Set described wasn't just ancient history, that it was still true, that it still lived in us, sleeping under all the ordinary mildness, waiting, the way it had always waited, for the moment it was needed. It happened on my way home. I'd booked passage on a mixed-species freighter, the Long Patience, heading back toward the frontier, and about halfway through the journey we were stopped. Not by pirates, by something worse, a ship of the Vihas. I need to tell you about the Vihas, because they're the closest thing the modern galaxy had to a rising tyranny, and because what happened next only makes sense if you understand them. The Vihas were an aggressive, expansionist power that had been growing for a few centuries out in the far systems, organized, ruthless, hungry, the kind of rising force that every free galaxy eventually produces, testing the edges, seeing what it could take. They weren't the concordance. Nothing was the concordance anymore. But they had ambitions in that direction, and they'd been getting bolder, and lately they'd taken to stopping ships in the border regions, inspecting them, taking what they wanted, testing how much the free galaxy would tolerate before it pushed back. They stopped the Long Patience the way they stopped everyone, a warship pulling alongside, boarding party coming across. The passengers and crew herded into the cargo hold while the Vihas decided what to confiscate and who to take. There were maybe 40 of us in that hold, a mix of species, Seti and Thesset and Lead and a few others, the ordinary population of a galactic freighter. And me, the only human aboard. And the Vihas boarding officer, a big, armored, arrogant creature, the kind that rises fast in a power like theirs. He walked the line of us in that hold, deciding our fates, and he got to me and he stopped. He looked at me for a long moment, and I watched something move across his face, something I recognized, because I'd spent 20 years learning to recognize it. That flicker of instinctive unease, that reflex, deeper than thought. He was looking at a human, and something old in him was pulling back, and he didn't know why, and it made him angry, the way not knowing always made them angry. A human, he said, and there was a sneer in it, but under the sneer was that unease he couldn't name. This far out, alone. Your people don't travel much, do they? You keep to your little dark corner. He leaned in. Why is that human? Why do your people hide in the dark at the edge of everything? And I looked at him. And I thought about Set and the concordance and the ancestors who paid everything and asked to be forgotten. And I understood that I was being given a choice, right there in that hold, a choice between the two ways of carrying the truth. I could threaten him with it. I could say, you have no idea what my people are, you have no idea what we did, corner us and find out. I could loose the poison. It would probably even have worked. The instinct in him was already there. I could see it. I'd only have to feed it. Or I could do the other thing, the harder thing, the thing our ancestors would have wanted. I didn't threaten him. I want you to know that, Because it's the whole point of everything I've told you. I looked at that arrogant VHAS officer, and I said quietly, "We don't hide, and it's not a little corner, it's just home. It's quiet because we like it quiet. We're a peaceful people. We keep to ourselves, we trade fairly, we don't want any trouble with anyone." I held his eyes. That's the truth. That's all we are, peaceful people who want to be left alone. And that was true. Every word of it was true. That is all we are now in this age, peaceful, ordinary, wanting to be left alone. Our ancestors made sure of it. They burned the monster out of us on purpose, buried it, gave us the gift of being ordinary. And I would not dishonor that gift by pretending to be the monster to frighten a bully. The whole point of what they did, the whole point of the forgetting, was so that we could be exactly what I was telling him we were. Peaceful. Kind. Wanting only to be left alone. The VHAS officer heard peaceful and want to be left alone, and he did what bullies always do. He heard weakness. He smiled. Peaceful, he repeated, savoring it. Peaceful and alone and far from any help. Good, then you won't mind coming with us. A human specimen, my superiors will be very interested. We so rarely get to examine one up close. He gestured, and two of his soldiers moved toward me. You've been left alone too long, I think. That ends today. And here is where the truth of what we are, the sleeping truth, the one under the mildness, here is where it stirred. Not in me threatening him, in him reaching for me, because there's a difference, you see. There's all the difference in the world. Our ancestors didn't break the concordance because they were threatened. They broke it because they were cornered, because submission was forced on them. The monster doesn't wake for a threat. It wakes when there's no other choice left. And the VHAS officer had just, without knowing it, started to make that true. I didn't fight him. I want to be clear. I'm a retired traffic analyst. I'm old. I couldn't have fought a VHAS soldier if my life depended on it, and it more or less did. That's not what happened. What happened was stranger and truer than that. What happened was the other passengers. Because here's the thing I hadn't understood until that moment, the thing that finished the whole picture for me. The instinct doesn't just live in the aliens as avoidance. It lives in them as something else too, something deeper, that only surfaces at the right moment. And the right moment is when they see a human cornered. As the VHAS soldiers reached for me, something happened in that cargo hold. The other passengers, the SETI and the Thesset and the lead, ordinary travelers, none of them soldiers, none of them brave, all of them just as helpless as me, they moved. Not all at once. It started with one, an old Thesset, who stepped sideways, putting herself between me and the soldiers. And then a SETI did the same. And then more. Until, without a word being organized, without anyone deciding it, 40 terrified alien passengers had put themselves between the VHAS and the single human in the hold. They didn't know why they were doing it. I could see it on their faces. The same confusion I'd seen on 100 navigators, the same groping bewilderment. They were doing a thing their instincts commanded and their minds couldn't explain. Something in the deep galactic memory, the same something that turned their ships away from our border, was screaming at them below thought, beneath thought. You do not let the humans be cornered. You do not let it happen again. Whatever the cost. You do not let them be forced to become what they become when they are cornered, because that is a thing the galaxy cannot survive twice. They were protecting the VHAS. That's the part that took me the longest to understand. They weren't protecting me. Not really. They were protecting everyone, protecting the galaxy from what would happen if a human were cornered again. The instinct our ancestors carved into the galactic mind wasn't just fear the humans. It was never let the humans be pushed that far again. Because the galaxy had seen, once, what we do when we're pushed that far, and the deep memory would rather do anything, would rather 40 ordinary passengers throw their bodies in the way than risk seeing it again. The VHAS officer was stunned. 40 unarmed passengers of species with no love for each other, no reason to protect a stranger standing between him and one old human woman, their faces baffled by their own actions. He didn't understand it. He couldn't. But he could feel it, that same old unease, magnified now, coming off the whole hold at once, and it frightened him badly in a way he couldn't name. And the old Thesset who'd moved first, she spoke. And what she said, I think, is the truest thing anyone has ever said about us, and she said it without understanding it, dragging it up from somewhere below her own memory. "Leave the human be," she said to the Vihas, her voice shaking. I cannot tell you why. I have never done anything like this in my life. But you must not take the human, you must not corner it. There is an old thing," she struggled, groping for a memory that wasn't there, only the shape of it, only the fear. "Something terrible happens if you corner them, something the galaxy cannot afford. I don't know what, but every part of me knows it must not happen. Leave the human be, for all our sakes, not for its sake, for all our sakes. Please." And the Vihas officer looked around that hold at 40 faces filled with a terror they couldn't explain. All of them turned not on him, but on the danger of what he might make the human become, and something in him broke. Some ambition, some certainty. He was a creature of a rising power, a would-be tyrant, and he had just run head first into the thing that every tyrant eventually runs into out here. The deep galactic instinct, older than any empire, that will not let the humans be cornered again. He pulled his soldiers back. He didn't take me. He didn't take anything in the end. He got his boarding party off that freighter as fast as he could, and the Vihas warship pulled away, and the long patience went on toward the frontier. And I stood in that cargo hold surrounded by 40 aliens who just saved me and had no idea why. All of them shaken, all of them avoiding my eyes, all of them feeling the wrongness of having done a thing they couldn't understand. I never told them. What would I have said? You did it because 100,000 years ago my ancestors broke the galaxy free by refusing to be ruled, and the memory of it lives in you as a command to never let us be pushed that far again. They couldn't have borne it. It wasn't mine to give. So I just thanked them quietly, and they nodded, embarrassed, and we all went back to our journey, and none of us ever spoke of it again. But I understood then that the thing Set told me wasn't dead history. It was alive. It was in every ship that turned from our border, in every navigator's made-up reason, and it was in 40 ordinary passengers throwing themselves between a bully and a stranger. The galaxy was still, 100,000 years later, organizing itself around the memory of what we did, protecting itself from the possibility of our being cornered again, keeping us safe in the deepest sense, not out of love, but out of a terror so old it had become a kind of reverence, a kind of care. They keep their distance from us, and they will never, ever let anyone corner us. Both of those things are the same instinct. Both of them are the galaxy remembering in its bones the price we once paid, and quietly, permanently, making sure we never have to pay it again. I went home after that, back to the frontier, to a small, quiet system to live out my years. I never published what I learned. I never made us famous or feared. I kept the weight, the way Set kept it, and I've told it to only a handful of people over the years, carefully, the way it was told to me, to people I trusted to carry it without being poisoned by it. And now I'm old, older than I ever expected to get, and I'm telling it one more time to you, because someone has to keep carrying it after I'm gone, and maybe that someone is you. I still watch the ship sometimes. I've got a little place with a view of the traffic lanes, and in the evenings I sit and watch the alien vessels sail past the edge of human space, and I watch them change course. Everyone. Turning away from our dark, adding days to their journeys, burning extra fuel for reasons they'll never understand. And where I used to find it strange and then found it fascinating, now I find it, I don't have a better word, now I find it tender. Because I know what it is now. It's not fear exactly. Not anymore. It's the galaxy taking care of us. It's 100,000 years of memory saying gently, over and over, in the only language instinct has, there they are, the ones who paid everything to set us free. Let them rest. Let them be quiet. Let them be ordinary and peaceful and safe. They earned it. God, how they earned it. Let them never be cornered again. We forgot what we did. Our ancestors made sure we'd forget, so that we could be free of it, so that we could be kind. But the galaxy remembers. The galaxy will always remember. And in its remembering, it keeps us safe, the way you'd keep something sacred safe at a distance, with reverence, with a care so deep and so old that the ones giving it don't even know they're giving it, and the ones receiving it don't even know it's there. Alien navigators always change course at the human frontier, without asking why. Now you know why, and I'll tell you the truth. I hope you're the last one who needs to. I hope we stay forgotten forever. I hope we stay ordinary and peaceful and quiet, and never have to remember what we are, and never have to become it again. Because the most beautiful thing my ancestors ever did wasn't breaking the galaxy free. It was choosing to forget they'd done it, so that their children could grow up gentle. And the galaxy turning its ships aside, all these ages later, that's just the universe's way of saying thank you to a people who no longer remember there's anything to thank them for.